At what age does the average person actually hit a net worth of $100,000? If you're in your late 20s or early 30s wondering if you're behind, here's the answer. Most people reach six figures in their late 30s and early 40s. The median net worth for ages 35 to 44 is about $135,000, while under 35, it's just $39,000. But here's what most people miss. Hitting 100K and keeping the momentum going are two completely different games. By the end of this, you'll know exactly why people hit this milestone when they do, why most stall immediately after, and the one decision at that crossroads that separates people who plateau from people who keep building. My name is Ivan, and I help people understand money, personal finance, and building wealth. If you're interested in getting your finances on track and maybe even getting ahead of the pack, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if this information helps you out. Here's why this milestone matters. Reaching $100,000 is a huge turning point, a stage where your financial choices start to determine whether you'll keep building wealth or end up plateauing. But most people don't hit it as early as social media makes you think. We're bombarded with images of young millionaires, early retirements, people spending like crazy. The truth, most people build wealth slowly, in increments tied to certain life factors. Understanding when and why this happens changes how you approach your own money. Let's start with the data because context matters here. These figures are based on households, not individuals. That means the numbers include all members living in the same household, singles, couples, families, and their combined assets and debt. Individual net worth would typically be lower, especially for younger adults. The Federal Reserve tracks this through their Survey of Consumer Finances, and they report the median, not the mean. Here's why that matters. The median represents the middle point. Half of people have more, half have less. It gives a much clearer picture of what's typical. The mean gets skewed upward by extremely wealthy people, making it look like most people are doing much better than they actually are. So here's what the data shows. For those under 35, median net worth is about $39,000. For ages 35 to 44, it jumps to roughly $135,000. The data doesn't give a precise age, but it shows a clear range. Most people cross that 100K threshold somewhere in their late 30s and early 40s. That might surprise you, but it shouldn't. There are 4 key reasons why this milestone hits when it does, and some of them you've probably never considered. First, marriage plays a big role. When two people get married, their assets and debts combine into a single household net worth. While this doesn't always result in immediate gains, a couple's combined earning and saving potential is usually higher than an individual's, though it can work in the opposite direction if spending habits aren't aligned. Picture two friends in their early 30s. One has managed to build a $40,000 net worth thanks to consistent investment contributions and no debt. The other has $20,000 in various assets but is carrying $50,000 in student loans, leaving them with a negative net worth of minus $30,000. If these two get married, their finances combine, and suddenly their household net worth becomes $10,000. Marriage doesn't just merge incomes, it means shared expenses, combined resources, and combined debt. Second, early career income is understandably low. Most young adults are just getting started in entry-level jobs, making $30,000 or $40,000 per year, trying to juggle student loans, rent, credit card bills, and all the costs of simply figuring out life after high school or college. That income barely covers living expenses, let alone leaves room for meaningful savings. Add in student debt and a car payment, and it can feel like no matter how hard you work, you're stuck at square one. It's actually really common for net worth to be negative in your 20s due to unsecured debt from student loans and credit cards. At this point, most people are lucky if their net worth isn't in the red. Between low starting salaries and bills piling up, it's no wonder so many young adults kick off adulthood negative, even when they're doing everything right. By the time people reach their 30s, things usually start to shift. Careers have progressed, so incomes tend to increase, giving more room to save and invest. Debts like student loans or credit cards may have been partially or fully paid off, which provides a huge boost to net worth and helps bring it up out of the red. Even small, consistent savings and investment habits begin to make a noticeable difference at this stage. Someone who was barely scraping by in their 20s might now be contributing regularly to a retirement account, building an emergency fund, or putting money into low-cost index funds. The combination of higher income, reduced debt, and steady investing is what typically triggers the first meaningful surge in household net worth, setting the stage for reaching that six-figure milestone in the mid-30s and 40s. Third, and this is the big one, Owning a home is often the biggest factor driving net worth for this age group. Most people purchase their first home in their 30s, giving them a huge opportunity to start growing wealth through home equity. Even though first-time home ownership happens quite a bit later than in the past, those in their 30s and early 40s are still much more likely to own a home than anyone under 35. And that single purchase can have a massive, sometimes one-time impact on overall net worth. If your monthly costs for owning are similar to what you'd pay in rent, you're effectively building wealth with every payment through principal reduction, tax benefits, and most significantly, potential property appreciation. Let me make this concrete. If someone buys a home for $475,000 and it appreciates at a fairly typical 4% per year, the property could be worth over $580,000 in just 5 years. That's a $105,000 increase without factoring in any other assets or non-mortgage debt. That alone would push their net worth past $100,000. While housing prices can fluctuate in the short term, over the long run, a home often becomes the largest investment for people who might otherwise have little else. Even though this isn't necessarily a great thing, and we'll get to why in a minute. Fourth, the first $100,000 is the hardest to achieve. Anyone who has built wealth will tell you that getting off the ground is often the most challenging part. Early savings grow slowly because compounding hasn't had enough time to make a noticeable impact. Even if people in their 20s invest in stocks, which would put them in the minority, right? The amounts they put in are usually small, so the gains are modest. If someone puts a few hundred a month into a retirement account for a couple of years, the growth can feel extremely slow. On $10,000 invested in the S&P 500, an average annual return might only add about $1,000, which can make it seem like progress is barely anything. Now, here's the thing about hitting that $100,000 mark. Not all wealth is created equal. A person might have a six-figure net worth on paper, but still have little real financial security. Net worth simply measures everything you own minus what you owe. So it includes home equity, cars you own outright, or that have equity, money in checking or savings, brokerage accounts, equity in a rental property, even a business that can be sold. But that doesn't mean all of it is actually working for you. Often just the opposite. Here's where most people unknowingly stall their wealth growth. Take a homeowner, for example. Someone might see their net worth shoot up simply because home prices in their area jumped 20% over the last few years. Suddenly, they're worth $100,000 more than before, but they haven't saved or invested a dime. If they're not actively putting money into compounding assets like stocks and ETFs, retirement accounts, and other compounding investments, their net worth might look impressive initially, but it's unlikely to continue growing at a meaningful rate. Let's shift gears to the critical distinction that changes everything: paper wealth versus compounding wealth. Paper wealth is tied up in things like home equity or a car you own outright. It feels good, but it doesn't really build momentum. Your net worth rises to $100,000 and then levels off. Compounding wealth, by contrast, comes from assets that grow on their own. The key difference is that instead of your net worth rising to $100,000 and then leveling off, it starts accelerating and snowballing over time, eventually growing at an unbelievable rate. Here's where the psychology piece kicks in. When people reach this crossroads, when they hit 100K, mostly from home equity, many feel wealthy because their home equity has gone up. But they often overlook one key fact. That's usually the fastest gain they'll see unless they make investing a priority. Without investing their money, their net worth may continue to creep up as the house appreciates, but it won't grow in any meaningful way. That six-figure number can stagnate for years, which is frustrating when it feels like you're doing everything right. So how does this happen? Many people do the basics right in their 20s and early 30s. They build up an emergency fund, pay down credit cards or student loans, and gradually increase their income. Then comes buying a house, and that's often where their progress slows. They see buying a house as the final major milestone they needed to reach, so investing never becomes a priority. Instead, any extra money goes towards things like upgrading cars every few years, moving into a bigger home with a higher mortgage and upkeep costs, taking nice vacations, and buying stuff they forget about after just a few hours. Purchases that make them look and feel wealthy. But because in their mind they've made it, none of that money ends up fueling compounding investments. This is the trap. You hit 100K, you feel like you've arrived. Your house is appreciating, your net worth statement looks solid, and you start spending like someone who's made it. But your actual wealth, the kind that buys freedom and options, stops growing. You're stuck in what looks like success but feels like running in place. Now the part no one tells you. Watch out. If you make the right choice at that crossroads and start putting a significant portion of your growing income into investments, your wealth can start growing much faster. With a larger base, compounding really kicks in, and every dollar you invest, save, or use to pay down debt has a bigger effect on your overall net worth. It's like rolling a snowball, small at first, but as it grows, it gains unstoppable momentum. That's why reaching your first $100,000 takes the most time and patience. But once you hit it, you can decide to continue that progress, setting yourself up for much faster growth in the years ahead. Let me give you the contrast that matters. The average person hits 100K around age 38 to 40, mostly through home equity and some retirement savings. They feel wealthy, upgrade their lifestyle, and their net worth barely moves for the next decade. They're at 140K by 48 instead of 400K. The disciplined person hits 100K by 35, recognizes it as the starting line, not the finish line, and keeps investing 15 to 20% of their growing income. By 40, they're at 250K. By 45, they're at 500K. Same economy, similar income growth, radically different outcomes. Here's the identity close. The first to $100,000 is hard because you're building from zero with small contributions and modest returns. But it's also the most important milestone because it proves the system works and sets up the compounding that comes next. The people who win don't treat 100K as the destination. They treat it as validation that they're doing it right, and they double down. The people who plateau treat it as permission to relax, upgrade, and coast. Both groups worked equally hard to get there. Only one group understands what happens next. Your next step, figure out where you stand. Add up your assets, home equity if you own, retirement accounts, savings, brokerage accounts, and subtract all debts. That's your net worth. If you're under 100K, focus on the basics. Automate 15% into investments, keep housing and transport under 50% of take home, pay off high interest debt. If you're at or past 100K, ask yourself honestly, are you building compounding wealth or just paper wealth? If most of your net worth is in your home, shift the balance. Increase your investment rate. Don't upgrade your lifestyle until your investments are growing faster than your expenses. Write down one action you'll take this month to keep momentum going.